It is very convenient for us always when we have problems to blame them on somebody else. We don't want to admit that. It's easier for us to blame that on China. Thank you very much. We've heard two fascinatingly upbeat messages from ping pong to Iowa. I bring you greetings from the dismal science. So I'm here to depress you. We have a serious relationship problem between the United States and China. How many of you are in a relationship? Come on, don't be bashful. Okay. Have you ever won a fight with your partner? Ever? Raise your hands if you have. Oh, there's someone. Oh, two. You're sitting together. Okay. That's good. That's very good. In my humble opinion, as an amateur economic psychologist, requires both partners to work together to agree on mutual responsibility for the roles they play in causing problems. And I would say that's true of the United States. It's also true of China. Both of us need to work better in building a lasting relationship. On the left is the latest reading from a poll put out by the Pew Research Center in Washington, which samples American views toward China over the last 15 years. Unfavorable hit a record high this year, up 13 percentage points from a year ago, the highest at the inception of this survey. The ones in this survey didn't particularly love China. The poisonous political view in the United States, unfortunately, has permeated into Main Street as well. And this is a view that is evident on a bipartisan basis, Republicans and Democrats alike. Why? There's a lot of talk about, we hear it from the US side, from the Chinese side, we're winning the trade war, you're losing the trade war, whatever. I agree with Chairman Jin in his comment in the video, no one wins a trade war. This is purchasing managers' sentiment that measures manufacturing activity in the US and China. And guess what? We're both losing. This is the line that denotes whether the manufacturing sector is expanding or contracting. In August of this year, last month, we both went into negative territory. Look at the stock market. This shows the equity markets, US and China. Day one of the trade war, when the tariffs first went into effect, July 6, 2018. Since that period, both markets have gone up and down. The Chinese market is actually up twice as much as the US market. Who's winning the trade war? No one is really winning the trade war. The view that America is suffering lasting damage because of our relationship with China is not something that we made up out of thin air. We have a lot of problems in the United States. And unfortunately for us, it is very convenient for us always when we have problems to blame them on somebody else. We did that with the Japanese 30 years ago. We're doing it again with China. I teach at Yale. I've been doing it for 10 years. And a little 30-second free of charge lesson in macroeconomics. We are told, we teach our students literally in the second week of their basic introductory course in macroeconomics that saving must equal investment. You all know that, you're smart. And when saving short countries want to grow, they must therefore either slow their growth rate down or import surplus savings from abroad. And when they have to do that, they have to run a balance of payments deficit to attract the capital. When you have a balance of payments deficit, you have a big trade deficit with lots of countries. Here's the list. We had trade deficits last year with 102 countries. China, the biggest, 47% I just showed you, But by higher math, take China out, there's still 101 left. The reason, again, is a shortfall of saving that is our fault, in large part because of budget deficits. We don't want to admit that. It's easier for us to blame that on China. Basic macro, we teach it at Yale, teach it at most universities. Several, it will remain nameless, of the current advisors of the Trump administration actually did go to Yale. Didn't do very well in their macro courses. The case for the U.S. Turning aggressive in this tariff war is a case that was made in great detail by our U.S. trade representative in a document published in March of 2018 that laid out a lot of allegations with respect to forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, cyber hacking, and illegal support for state-owned enterprise. I have written a fair amount about this. The one thing I would tell you about today is that the evidence on the technology front, especially the intellectual property, the allegations of intellectual property theft, which is derived largely from these two reports that you see on the right, is not the type of evidence that would actually be allowed to be introduced in a U.S. court of law. It's circumstantial evidence at best, and a good deal worse than that, if you really want to dig into it. We have not made a compellingly strong case on the issues that are now headlined in the negotiations between us. The president continues to insist, completely incorrectly in my view, that China pays for the tariffs, even though the tariffs, of course, are collected on importers who largely reside in the United States. Our country is actually more vulnerable to a trade shock today, with trade equaling close to 30% of GDP right now versus 11% back then, than it was during that earlier period. This is a different type of conflict. Our conflict with the former Soviet Union was an ideological conflict. This is not about ideology. This is an economic conflict. The idea that just because we won the first Cold War, we're strong enough to win another one, I would draw that into question. Both the US and China have deep existential fears of one another. China fears the US wants to contain it, contain its rise to the status to which it aspires by 2050. And the US has deep fears that China is trying to capture the emerging industries of the future. And without that, we will have no economic future. If you look at an index that's assembled by a bunch of academics, China is definitely catching up on the innovation front. Will it surpass the US, and on what terms? Those are the things we need to work out in our negotiations with China. This deal that has been talked about for so long, what we need to do, I think, is think about a different way to negotiate on different issues that can really build the relationship back together on the basis of mutual trust. So I'm looking for progress on market access, where we have access to China's market, most rapidly growing market in the world. China has access to ours. I'm looking for macroeconomic adjustments in both countries, where we save more and China saves less. I'm looking for us to take joint leadership in the cyber area. This is a global problem, not a bilateral problem. We can do better. We must do better. Thank you very much.